I was sitting at the kitchen table here in Charlotte yesterday morning, just watching the sun hit the linoleum. You know that specific morning light that shows every bit of dust you missed? I had my pill organizer open, that little blue plastic box that dictates the rhythm of my life these days. Click, click, click. One for the blood pressure, one for the cholesterol, and then there's that little pink one, the vitamin B12. I've been taking that B12 for as long as I can remember because Danielle, my daughter, she's an assistant nutritionist, and she's always telling me, Pop, after 60, your body just isn't a sponge anymore. It's more like an old terracotta pot that's gone dry. You pour things in, but they just run right through the cracks. I'm 72 years old now, and I've learned that when you hit this age, you start to treat vitamins like a kind of insurance policy. You take them because you want to be around to see the grandkids graduate, or maybe just because you want to keep your mind sharp enough to win a debate with Marcus when he comes over to talk about insurance. But something happened recently that changed how I look at that little pink pill. It was a scare that didn't come with a loud siren or a sudden pain in my chest. It was a silent kind of danger, the kind that hides behind the things we think are keeping us safe. Right now, while I'm talking to you, there's a quiet crisis happening in millions of homes across this country, and it's especially hitting us, the ones over 60. It's a situation where the very supplements we trust are being turned into something harmful because of how they interact with the medications our doctors gave us to save our lives. If you're like me, and you take a B12 supplement every morning along with your regular prescriptions, I need you to listen to what I'm about to say as if your life depends on it, because in a very real way, it might. Today I'm going to share 3 specific things with you that almost no one is talking about in the waiting rooms. First, I'm going to tell you about the 2 most common medications that turn B12 into a liability instead of an asset. Second, I'm going to explain exactly what is happening inside your arteries when these things clash, using a way of looking at it that finally made sense to me. And third, I'm going to tell you about the one specific change I made to my own routine that stopped the damage and started the healing. Something you can do today without spending a fortune or needing a new prescription. Control starts with what you stop normalizing, and for a long time, I was normalizing a risk I didn't even know I was taking. For years, I worked in public transit. I started out driving the routes, and eventually, I moved up to supervising the whole operation. When you're managing a fleet of buses, you learn one thing very quickly. The system only works if the connections are solid. If the fuel is good but the filters are clogged, the bus doesn't move. If the driver is ready but the keys are missing, the route fails. Everything is a chain. My health was a chain too, but I didn't realize I had 2 major links that were starting to rust. I discovered the hard way that what I believed about my safe vitamins wasn't the whole story. I thought as long as I put the B12 in my mouth, my body was using it. I thought the numbers on my blood test meant I was protected. But there's a paradox at the heart of senior health that many of our doctors just don't have the time to explain in those 15-minute appointments. The paradox is this. You can have a blood test that says your B12 levels are high, even, quote, perfect, while your heart and your brain are actually starving for it. And even worse, that excess B12, when it can't find its way into your cells, can actually trigger a buildup of a toxic substance that acts like sandpaper on the inside of your heart. My daughter Danielle was the one who finally sat me down and showed me the research that the system often ignores. She told me, Pop, you're filling the tank, but the engine is locked. Let me explain this the way I had to explain it to myself to truly understand the danger. Think about your body like a busy transit terminal. Your vitamin B12 is like a group of essential workers trying to get to their shifts. To get there, they need a specific shuttle bus. In our bodies, that shuttle is something called intrinsic factor. It's a protein our stomachs make. Now, here's where the first medication comes in, metformin. If you're managing type 2 diabetes, you probably know metformin well. It's a workhorse medication. But over time, metformin starts to mess with the shuttle bus service. It quietly cancels the routes. It tells the intrinsic factor to stop showing up. So you take your B12 supplement, and those workers arrive at the station, but there's no bus to take them into the bloodstream where they can actually do their jobs. They just sit there at the station, piling up, while the city they were supposed to maintain starts to fall apart. Now, your doctor does a blood test and sees all those workers waiting at the station, and he says, "Look, William, your B12 levels are great. You have plenty of workers." But he isn't looking at the fact that none of them are actually at work. They aren't in your nerves, and they aren't helping your heart. And then there's the second medication, the one for acid reflux. I'm talking about things like omeprazole or any of those purple pills we take for heartburn. These are called PPIs. Now, your stomach needs acid to unlock the B12 from the food you eat or even from certain supplements. It's like the key to the workers' lockers. When you take those acid blockers for years, and I know some of you have been on them for a decade or more, you're basically changing the locks every single day. The B12 stays locked up. It becomes erratic. Some days a little bit gets through, some days nothing does. This creates a chaotic environment in your blood. When your body can't process that B12 correctly because of the metformin or the acid blockers, it causes a backup of something called homocysteine. This is the part that really scared me. Homocysteine is an amino acid, and when it builds up, it's not just a number on a page. It becomes physical. Imagine a bus driving down a smooth road. Now imagine someone throwing handfuls of sharp, jagged sand onto that road every single day. Eventually, the road starts to pit. It cracks. It loses its smoothness. That's what elevated homocysteine does to the lining of your arteries. It inflames them. It makes them stiff, like an old garden hose that's been left out in the sun for 3 summers. A stiff artery doesn't flex when your blood pressure spikes. It doesn't give. It just breaks. And we all know what that break looks like. It's a stroke. It's a heart attack. It's the phone call your family never wants to receive. I remember a man I worked with back at the Transit Authority, a guy named Otis. Otis was a supervisor like me, a big man, always had a joke, always seemed like he was made of iron. He was on metformin for years, and he took his B12 and his multivitamins every single day. He was proud of how he followed the rules. I remember we were in the break room one Tuesday, and Otis was telling me how he felt a little off, just a bit of tontura, dizziness, and some heaviness in his legs. He figured it was just the humidity or the stress of the morning shift. He didn't think twice about it because his last checkup said his numbers were fine. 2 hours later, Otis was on the floor of the dispatch office. He'd had a stroke. He survived, but he was never the same. He went from a man who could manage 100 buses to a man who couldn't hold a spoon. When I visited him in the hospital, I kept thinking about those fine numbers. It turns out Otis had a homocysteine level that was through the roof, but no one had ever checked it because his B12 levels looked normal on the surface. He was doing everything he thought was right, but the combination of his meds and his supplement was quietly sanding down his arteries from the inside. Seeing Otis like that was a wake-up call I couldn't ignore. I realized that pressure rarely rises alone. It rises with the habits we ignore. I started doing my own digging after that. I talked to Danielle, and I went to my own doctor with a list of questions that probably made him wish he had a shorter appointment list. I found out that the standard B12 test most of us get is actually pretty basic. It measures the total amount of B12 in your blood, but it doesn't tell you how much is active, meaning how much is actually getting into your cells to do the work. It's like counting the buses in the yard but not checking to see if they have engines. I found a study from the Cleveland Clinic that called elevated homocysteine a significant and under-recognized risk factor for us over 60. They found that people with high homocysteine had a much higher risk of these unexplained strokes, the ones where the doctor says, "We don't know why this happened, your cholesterol was low." The reason was the inflammation caused by that sandpaper effect. In my own case, when I finally got my homocysteine checked, it was at 28. A safe level is usually below 15. At 28, I was walking around with a ticking clock in my chest, and all the while, I was patting myself on the back for taking my safe B12 every morning. I was 72 years old and realized I was almost the next Otis. So what did I do? How did I save my heart after that scare? The answer wasn't to stop taking B12. We need B12. Without it, our brains get foggy, our nerves start to tingle, and we lose our balance. The answer was to stop taking the wrong kind of B12. If you look at your bottle right now, chances are it says cyanocobalamin. That's the most common form because it's cheap to make. But for us over 60, especially those of us on metformin or acid blockers, our bodies have to work too hard to convert that form into something usable. It's like being given a set of IKEA furniture with the instructions written in a language you don't speak. You have all the parts, but you can't put it together. I switched to a form called methylcobalamin. This is the active form. It's like the furniture already comes assembled and ready to use. Your body doesn't have to fight the metformin or the lack of stomach acid to get it into your system. When I made that switch and I started taking it alongside a small dose of B6 and folate, which Danielle says helps the homocysteine conversion, my numbers started to move. I also changed when I take it. I used to just throw everything back with my morning coffee, but those acid blockers I was taking for my reflux were strongest in the morning. So I started taking my methylcobalamin B12 in the middle of the afternoon, away from my other meds, giving my body a window where the shuttle bus might actually be running. And I'll tell you, the difference wasn't just on a lab report. About 2 months into this new routine, I noticed the heaviness in my legs started to lift. That fog I thought was just part of being 72 started to clear. I felt like I was back in control of the operation. Gloria noticed it too. She told me I wasn't napping as much after lunch, and I had more energy to chase the grandkids around the backyard here in Charlotte. I went back for a follow-up test 90 days later. My homocysteine had dropped from 28 down to 16. It wasn't perfect, but the sandpaper was being cleared away. I wasn't just taking a pill anymore. I was actually nourishing my body. You don't want the first real warning to be an emergency. That's why I'm telling you this today. If you are on metformin or a PPI like omeprazole, you need to do 3 things. First, don't just ask for a B12 test. Ask your doctor for a homocysteine test and an active B12 or MMA test. These are the ones that actually show if the workers are getting to their shifts. Second, look at your supplement bottle. If it says cyanocobalamin, consider finishing that bottle and switching to methylcobalamin. It might cost a few dollars more, but what is the cost of a stroke? Third, have a real, serious conversation with your doctor about how long you've been on those acid blockers. Many of us were put on them for a temporary problem and just stayed on them for 20 years. A life stable builds a body more stable, but that stability requires us to pay attention to the details. Most people wait for a scare before they change. I had my scare with Otis, and I had my scare with my own lab results. I don't want you to have to go through that. I want you to have the information now while you can still do something about it. I'm not a doctor. I'm just a man who has spent a lot of time supervising complex systems, and I realized my own body was the most complex system I ever had to manage. I had to learn to stop trusting the standard advice and start looking at what was actually happening under the hood. My son Marcus always says that most men my age ignore their health because they think they still have time. But time is the one thing we can't buy more of. We can only choose how we use what we have left. I'm still here, still moving, and still learning every day. Just this morning, I was out in the yard with the grandkids, and I felt a level of steady energy I haven't felt in years. It wasn't a miracle or a secret. It was just about fixing the connections in the chain. It was about making sure the workers had their shuttle bus and their keys. I'm going to keep monitoring my numbers, and I'm going to keep talking to Gloria and Danielle about these things, because the heart pays attention to what we repeat every day. I'm 72 years old, and I'm not finished yet. I have more routes to supervise, more stories to tell, and more time to spend with the people I love. I want the same for you. Take a look at those bottles today. Ask for those tests. Don't let a silent problem become a loud catastrophe. I'm William Brooks, and I'm still here, still watching a road, and I'll be here next time we talk. I'm going to go get my walking shoes on now. The grandkids are already waiting by the door, and they don't have much patience for a slow grandfather. We have some miles to cover today.